Okay. Mike, don't let me forget I need to put that picture up for when you talk to Chris. I haven't put it up yet. I don't want to forget.
Oh,
So,
sounds good.
all right, where's my intro, outro? Okay, cool. All right, well, I'll play the intro and then we'll get started. Okay, be right back.
There's something in the basement.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum and happy Found Footage Friday. We are back talking found footage on a Friday with my co-host, Mike and Serial.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. Hope it's getting a lot better now that you're watching us.
That's right. That's our new slogan for the show for anyone who hasn't been watching the last couple weeks. Today, this has been a long time coming because I have been talking about this guy for literal 2 years at this point. But today we have a very special episode where we are talking with Ash Hamilton. I've done a previous review with Tom was on as co-host where we covered Holes in the Sky. Big fans, excited when we found out you were doing something else. And so we're here to talk Final Days, Tales from the End of Times. And so yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to talk to you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate any promotion in one way or another. The fact that you've been talking about me is lovely, and the fact that it's in a good light is even better because that'll
Yeah.
vary. So thank you.
Yeah, well, and Mike knows this, of course, and most people who have been following Found Footage Fridays for a while know this, but anything alien is all me. So when we watched Holes on kind of an accident finding it, it was like an immediate like, and then we did end up really really liking it. And so and you were so great about. I mean, I feel like you genuinely care about feedback, and you were really excited to share, and it was just a really cool thing to see us going back and forth about your past project and then being able to do it again for this project. So that was really cool, and we appreciate it for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anybody who's not familiar with the format of these, we're here to talk found footage, and we're really excited about this one. Mike and I have already done our review for Final Days. I'll try to remember to put it in the cloud so you can go back and watch it if you haven't. You can watch it, of course, on Found TV. And so, yeah, I kind of want to give everybody an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better before we jump completely into Final Days and just kind of how you got into filmmaking and how you ended up doing this project.
Well, I've been doing film in one capacity or another for quite a while,
Right.
and the origins is just very banal and not that interesting. So I will try to lie in a convincing
All good.
manner so that we make it big and epic. But
Okay.
for for the most part, I actually started off wanting to be an animator. That was sort of my first love, and I was a fine artist and illustrator for years. Did some work in the comic book industry for the bottom, sort of dropped out of it.
Yeah.
So my love has always sort of been animation, but I'm a huge fan of the fantastic and science fiction and horror genres.
Yeah.
In case you can't tell from my surroundings,
From the
yeah, I'm
yeah.
a little preoccupied with it. But I
That's
was I was living in New York for quite a while,
yeah.
and I was doing some 3D modeling and stuff there, coming off from getting my degree in animation,
Hmm.
and a lot of that stuff is very reminiscent of doing film. It
Right.
works along the same principles, and a lot of the
Yeah.
mechanics are very very similar.
Hmm.
So I ended up just doing a lot of video for like corporate culture videos for
Uh,
companies. I ended up doing
yeah.
a lot of the evacuation procedure videos after 9/11, actually in
Oh,
New York.
wow.
So going into these high rises and taking cameras and having them see the points of
Right.
ingress and egress and us videoing that. So that was sort of my like sticking my toe in the water of putting together productions, having
Sure.
units where we have different cameras, we're miking up, and sort of understanding the logistics of what film is, but sort of from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Um, And of course, I was always a big movie guy. So the idea of trying to place a little bit of narrative and stuff like that, even sometimes when it's not easy, like when you're doing a corporate culture video, you're like,
Yeah.
Sure.
how do we make this warm and fuzzy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How do we make this corporate conglomerate not seem megalomaniacal and devious? So,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
put the person with the kindest face in front of it and try to sort of spin the yarn around it. So,
Sure.
and if you can do that, like if you can make huge faceless corporations look halfway decent, you're like, maybe I can make a movie. So
Yeah.
about around that time, I was just doing a lot of podcasting and stuff and talking to filmmakers and talking
Yeah.
to, strangely, also people in the paranormal fields, because I've always had a very uh, big interest in that and
Yeah.
big interest in ufology too. So
Okay.
I was talking to a lot of people who had personal experiences, and regardless of what like your level of belief is, these
Yeah.
experiences sometimes are extremely like haunting. Even as
Yeah.
a viewer or listener, they're pretty haunting. So
Yeah.
I decided that I was gonna, do some web related stuff, podcast related stuff that sort of cross pollinated the idea of the paranormal and filmmaking, two things that I love.
Yeah.
So then I created a site, which is Horrorfix, and started
Yep.
doing reviews and got to know a lot of filmmakers very well, got to know a lot of actors really well.
Sure.
And then eventually I kept thinking, like, maybe I should do something. Maybe I should do something that's not a corporate culture video, something that maybe sleep a little better at night. That's the strange thing, that like maybe I should do horror films. Horror films will
This
make me
will make
sleep better at
I love
night than
it.
doing corporate culture videos,
Yeah.
or at least a little less guilty.
No,
So
I get it.
at that point, we were doing a board game. So I
Okay.
created this board game at one point, and we said we should probably do like a commercial for it. And it was this board game that changes every time you play it, so that it resembles sort of a different horror movie. So we decided to get a bunch of cameras together, get some actors locally, and we were going to create a commercial. Just
Uh-huh.
something maybe to put on a crowdfunding and to get people interested in it. So we started doing this, and the commercial turned into like a little short film that we were sort of showing around, trying to get people interested in the idea of playing this game.
Yeah.
And it's sort of strange when you catch like the bug to do something, when you're sitting
Yeah.
there and sort of in the trenches and you're doing it, and you realize that you can do it, because it seems very
Yeah.
overwhelming and just extremely like daunting. The idea of making a film is a pretty huge endeavor. So
Yeah. For
I
sure.
thought, stupidly, I'm like, if I make a 5-minute short film, I can easily make a feature film. Yeah, that's like, let's trick myself into thinking that I can do this. And then it was like, let's try to do it over COVID too. Why not? So we had wrote a conventional horror comedy that was about this is like, when I look back on it now, I'm like, how did I ever think I was going to be able to make this? But anyways, so I've been like enthralled with the idea. I'm Catholic, and a big part of my family is Catholic. Not really practicing, but a big part of
Yeah.
my family is Catholic, and like the Catholic Church is just spooky. Like it's really bizarre.
For sure.
Like every religion is really bizarre when you get into it. Besides the whole like, let's pass the collection plate around, which is sort of bizarre anyways. But then you get
Yeah.
into like, oh yeah, that'll happen in the end days. There's a 7-headed dragon, and all these people come out, and there's all these plagues and stuff, and you're like, this. It just reads more like science fiction. So
Sure.
I had this idea. It was like, well, what if one of the Catholic priests, who were also seers, these prophets, wasn't good at it, just wasn't good at it at all, and maybe he was a bit of a pervert. Like, perverts in the Catholic Church, I know it's a stretch, but just buckle down and bear with me for a second. So I know it's like suspend disbelief, but apparently this could happen.
Oh
So
no.
I decided to write the story about a Catholic priest who gave all these horribly wrong predictions, but still had this sort of following in a Canadian sect of the Catholic Church. And he predicted that there was going to be a huge clash between good and evil in the middle of nowhere in Canada. And it just happens to be a ridiculous gentleman's lounge called the Beaver Dam. So it was going to take place there. And so they send these these warrior nuns to infiltrate the strip club. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm easily going to get this funded. So they sent these warrior nuns to infiltrate the strip club to become strippers, and they send them about 6 years too early. So they just get like good and strung out. Like
Right.
by the time the apocalypse is almost happening, they're just forget it. They're down and out. Like they are in the stripper life. They've been doing it for like 6 years.
For so long,
So
yeah.
yeah, so by the time the night actually comes that, you know, the son of the devil is supposed to be born and everything, like it just doesn't go well, and it's sort of madcap and zany and all this. And it was also extremely gory. Like we wrote it with the idea of let's mix elements of, you know, Reanimator and
Oh, I love it.
Evil Dead, and let's
Yeah.
do Dead Alive, and let's do something that's as over the top as we possibly can get. And like I would, it's horrible the fact that like the world actually is saved by a woman who can externally ejaculate, and we had this in the script, and we were passing it around like, isn't this great? And like in hindsight, I'm like, maybe we should have dialed back on the scoring. Maybe if we would have just dialed back a little bit, but we thought it was funny. And believe it or not, we got some people behind it. And we had a person at the time who was doing some work for Universal and stuff. And the script got around. And they were like, hey, I think we can get some money for whatever reason to make this movie. And we started like casting people. And it was the perfect shitstorm. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. For example, COVID. Like, and I'm not saying that my film really was, you know, like the beginnings of COVID, but if I'm going to blame it on something, I think that unfortunately my film was the beginning of COVID. So we couldn't get like anybody together. Nobody knew at that point in time because it was going to be a SAG film. Nobody knew at that point in time if we even could do it. Like people were staying on set, they weren't even allowed offset, and then people were doing a lot of stuff remotely. So long story short, the movie did not happen. And like a ton of other movies, you know, there are movies that don't happen, the movies that get made, you know.
Right.
So,
Sure.
Yeah.
And everybody, you know, said the right thing, and they said, hey, don't take this personally. It happens all the time. This was just the perfect storm of all these elements coming together to sort of capsize this idea. So I took all their advice and I sunk into a horrible existential dread and felt really sorry for myself because, you know, everyone says don't worry about it. So you worry about it basically until you're just curled up little ball in the corner of your shower and like scrubbing the disappointment off of you with a steel wool brush. So at that point, I was like, well, I don't know when things are going to bounce back. So I've always been a fan of found footage. And I think it's a fantastic medium that I still actually believe is hugely underutilized. Even though we have a vast array of movies that take place within the subgenre, I still think it's vastly underutilized. So I had talked a lot with this guy, Terry Lovelace, who was an experiencer and an abductee. And great guy, and his stories are just absolutely chilling. Again, regardless of what your level of belief, the narrative there is terrifying.
I'm a strong believer, just so we get that like out. I'm very much a and I think that's why I like those types of stories so much, is because I'm like real life terrified of the what I believe to be reality of aliens. Like I'm terrified of it. So it works.
Oh, I have a plethora of bizarre stories just from like being around certain people and talking about these things. It sort of penetrates your life, whether you like it to or not.
Sure.
So I wanted to do something that was definitely in the vein of my interests. And you know, it came about that Holes in the Sky was something that I really wanted to do, which was a different approach, because or at least I thought it was a different approach. I mean, what I wanted to do is I wanted to focus on something that was more about this idea of loss and the idea of sort of a lack of a support group. You know, these are people that, again, regardless of the reality of it. These are people who definitely suffer horrible acts of trauma. They have
Yeah.
PTSD, and they're sort of trying to live their lives. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is that largely, like the psychiatric community, the medical community, tends to disregard the trauma because they're looking at a situation that is largely based on belief or disbelief.
Sure.
But whatever happened, the trauma is still there.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of these people, unfortunately, the community is short-sighted in the fact that the trauma still needs to be dealt with, regardless of
Right.
the way you feel about the phenomena. And that was
Yeah.
kind of what I wanted to do with Holes in the Sky a lot, was that, focus on the fact that these people are going through something, that they are experiencing something that is sort of difficult to explain, difficult to talk about. And being a big fan of, I think, some really like well done documentaries, like Mungo, The Tunnel,
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
like that. When you see stuff that's convincing like that, that's sort of what we set out to do with
Yeah.
a extremely low budget and extremely limited resources, coming off of trying to do a huge film that didn't get made.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but that
I
was
know, but
sort of
you made it sound like it wasn't going to be interesting, and it was insanely interesting.
I was just gonna say, I was like, there was a story within that story.
it's a Chinese box or a Russian doll of stories, if you will.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And we made that, and it was really well received. We went on the film festival circuit with it, and won a
Yeah.
considerable
I love that one.
amount of awards, and something that we didn't really think was going to happen. Our idea, more so than anything, was just, we need a proof of concept that we can make a feature film with limited resources on an indie level, and do it with a degree of legitimacy. And luckily we had a lot of equipment, so that learning curve was knocked a little bit flat early on. So there wasn't a whole lot of curve that we had to squash. It was just about, let's use what we have, let's really rein in our resources, and let's do something that we were all sort of passionate about, that was involved. And then, we got that. And at that point, you don't really sort of know what to do. Like, after you make something that actually exists, you put it out in the world, and
Yeah.
you sort of deal with it as being its own entity, and it does its own things after that. And you start to have like less and less control over who it touches and who sees it and what people feel.
Yeah.
Is that you ask yourself, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to keep doing something exactly like it? Do I want to try to do something different? What I want to do? And I have a head that loves found footage, and I have a part of me that really loves traditional cinematic narrative too. And a part of me was like, well, maybe we can bridge these things together, which is a bit of a long shot, because you get audiences that really want one specific genre and one
They
specific
get mad
genre.
when you put them
Opposed to
together.
very
Yeah.
delineated. But
Yeah.
the idea was that I knew filmmakers that were very prolific, like they could just get stuff done. And in horror, and specifically indie horror, just finding people who can get stuff done is like a pretty big feat, because most of us are doing this while we're working 40 hours a week, while we have families,
Yeah,
where we're just
exactly.
juggling life.
Yeah.
And any film getting made in the indie sphere is a miracle. It's an absolute miracle. But then finding like 4 other guys who can do it is like, you're
Even.
really
Yeah.
putting your blue chips like on one number, and you're because the idea is that it probably won't get made. Like, that's what you
Right.
got to look at. You got to look at the reality of it, is that if you're relying on yourself, and you know that you're prone to setbacks and obstacles, and then you multiply that, by 4, it's like, oh. But
Right.
I think that we kept it really like loose. And the idea was that, hey, I really like the idea of like not having a good ending, like not having a
Of course.
happy upbeat ending.
Yeah.
I'm sort of a fan of not having to wrap it up, like that.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the idea.
You kind of leaned into a question of mine because you have a feature film that you've done and directed on your own, Holes in the Sky, and you're doing this anthology series with multiple other directors, writers, etc. What benefits and challenges do you feel that you faced um, with one concept over the other? Like, obviously, you said there's difficulty when you're dealing with other people, but did you also see a good benefit doing this type of anthology project with other people?
I think the great thing was knowing that you've got so many degrees of capability with these other people.
Hmm.
They've already got stuff made. They're, in channel. They're in the market. They know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and and luckily that does take some of the heavy lifting off, because you are able to also say, I can do something that's a little smaller and a little more contained, and then we can all rely on each other to pick up a different piece of that storytelling, whether it's something that's more emotional or something that's more creepy or something
Yeah.
that's more action or whatever, instead of writing this 80 to 90 page script that really encompasses all of that. You're able to go, okay, I'm going to take this piece. I think that this is the piece I want to focus on, because I know that this person right here wrote something that was more emotionally
Huh.
impactful. I know
Yeah.
that this person right here wanted to go for straight horror. And it does take a little bit also of the burden of doing something that hits a wider audience individually,
I could
because
see
then you
that.
can just say, okay, I just want to focus on something that's crazy and out of control. Like that's what I want to
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
it's hard to do that for 90 minutes. But if you
Sure.
have other people, again, that are taking some of the dips and some of the hills on the roller coaster with you, then
Yeah.
they're here, and then you can sort of focus on that tiny little spot. I hope that answers your question.
No, it did. And one thing I really did love, and we mentioned this when we were reviewing the movie, what I really did like was obviously you did see the different viewpoints of each director, but the
Yeah.
movie itself was still so cohesive
Yeah,
that,
it
like,
flowed.
yeah, it
I
was like you
completely
guys were
agree.
sharing one mind, even though there were still different, like, you can tell that there were certain people where I'm like, I know whose movie this was, but the whole thing just flowed so perfect that,
Yeah.
and that's hard for anthology movies. Sometimes they're a little
Uh-huh.
like disconnected. This one was not.
I would add to that, and I know, like, Mike and I have sort of already talked about this, I think even off camera, so I'm not just saying this because Ash is in front of us, but I would say that I think
It's
that
okay
part was
too. I would totally take it.
well, I think you know by now we are very honest here. We're very honest about how we
Oh
feel
yeah,
about things because we don't feel like it benefits to not be. But I would say, because we
agreed.
talked about this being, along the same vein as VHS, but I would say in a lot of ways, because one of the biggest issues they've had lately is their overlaps and the way that there is a lot of disconnect between the stories when they're transitioning into them. And I would say that Final Days is got that down better than VHS because
Well,
this
thank you very much.
I mean, I have to say, genuinely, I think if you go into this and you don't know it's multiple directors, I realize that there's style differences. I would never say otherwise. That part is clear, but I don't know that you would think that it was pieced together in that way because it is so cohesive. And I got to say, the chaos thing nailed it. There is like so many different things going on. That ending came out of nowhere, and all the between all the different pieces. Of what is going on and the types of things that we're seeing that's bad. And I don't want to go too spoilery because we did the review already and we did talk about spoilers specifically, but just the things that were in there were so well rounded. Exactly like what you were saying, Ash, where you've got something where you've got this one particular story that's more about humans and it's more about emotions. And then you've got the straight horror and you've got the suspense or the dark angles where you can't see where you're going. And I just think that it was so well done to have been so many different people. And not that VHS didn't have indie roots originally. It's kind of gotten away from that now because now they're
Yeah,
using like Mike Flanagan and it's like, but for this to be
they've got a bit
indie,
of a budget, but
they
Yeah.
got a bit of a budget. And then that weird one that I hated from the last one was Justin Long's brother. Like, come on. But
yeah.
for this to be
Tonally, that one
in
I agree. Tonally, I think that one was very
Misplaced.
disruptive.
Bro.
You know, as you're watching,
And
you're just kind of like,
and it's just a redo of a movie his brother was in. I can't. I was so mad. I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. That one had me so angry. But my point in saying all of that is this might be something where we've semi seen before, but it's executed in such a way that it's a totally unique experience. And exactly like Mike said, it's cohesive. And I was so like blown away by that because I was like, all these different people, all these different ideas, and it's just seamless. So I thought that was I just thought that part specifically was just really, really well done.
well, thank you, because it was just a happy accident. Like we didn't think that it
I
was.
think it's probably because you guys work together so well is what I would assume. I would
Yeah.
assume the relationships were there and that's probably why, but yeah, hats
Y-
off.
You know, I think maybe at some point, and like I'll totally own up to this, that I would not be surprised if like some of the other guys were a bit frustrated with me because I
Oh
was
yeah?
so very much like I just didn't want anyone to feel like they had to do something a certain way. Like
Sure.
the idea was that I really wanted everyone to see that these are very different and unique filmmakers, and
Yeah,
no
for
one's
sure.
trying to outdo one another. No one's trying
No.
to do anything like that. So there were times where I'm sure that they were like, why isn't he being more descriptive? Why is he telling me more?
Too vague?
And I was just kind of like, you know, as long as like I was like, here's my script.
Yeah.
Here's the overarching idea. Here's how we're trying to connect things. Have fun. And if we need to do something in the editing room, we'll do it. But
Yeah.
there were times I'm sure they were probably just sitting there like, this guy does not know what he's doing. Like this thing's never gonna get made. Like this guy has no clue. He's just
Aw.
giving us stuff to do. And I would totally like agree with those misgivings because I
Yeah.
wanted to be a little like a little aloof. You know, I didn't want to constrain things to the point where people weren't having fun. That was like the
Yeah.
big thing because movies in the beginning are a ton of fun. Like when you're sitting and talking to your friends
You're like,
and
yeah.
yeah, and you're like, oh, I've got this idea, you know, the
Yeah,
nun,
yeah, yeah.
and then everybody's really excited. And then even making the movie, you're like, it's you know, it's high energy. There's a lot of enthusiasm. You know, you're meeting people. There's a huge aspect of networking and this,
Mhm.
you know, idea of community sort of forms from being in and around these productions. And then you're sitting editing this thing for a year. You're doing
Oh,
digital effects.
yeah.
You're doing this. You're doing that. So there's a very big aspect to filmmaking that's like it's not so fun. Mind you, the worst day at filmmaking is still probably better than the best day at any other job that I've had. But it's like you do go through those periods where you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you're lying in bed and you're thinking about a certain edit and you're just like, oh yeah, this is working, or I just want to, you know, or you get a little obsessive, which I tend to do sometimes. And it's an effort, you know, it's like a huge effort. So the idea is let's try to keep it as fun as possible because that idea of what we all have to do, like post-production and everything, and then even marketing and the distribution game is full of plenty of headaches. So it's like,
Oh,
please try
I'm
to have as
sure.
much fun as possible. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm sure.
Well, you had mentioned like that making movies. Obviously, it's still a job, but it is fun, and you could tell, especially towards the end, that everybody involved in this movie was having a fun time. Uh,
Yeah.
there, like Angel said earlier, there was just so much chaos, but it looked like a scream to be on that. Like I would love to be on that set because I'm like, they just look like they're having a ball right now.
It was a ton of fun. Like that, we shot a period of about 3 days,
Mhm.
and it was an old college, like it was
Oh,
a defunct college, and not far from me actually, about a half an hour from where I live. And we had looked at a lot of locations because we knew that we sort of had to have like a quad. We
mhm.
knew we needed that, and we knew that we needed to have a number of different buildings. Like we wanted to give the idea that this was probably someplace that had been repurposed for a commune or whatever, you know. So the idea was always like we need buildings, we need some kind of central area that is away from a lot of streets because we can't see
Yeah.
like people jogging, you know, during the apocalypse, and waving. It's like
Right.
we've got to sort of contain the crazy in a way. So
Yeah.
we looked everywhere. We had looked, places that had some drone shots and everything, and it just really didn't come together. And then my wife actually was like, I think this college,
Ooh,
we
cool.
might, I think they sold it to private buyers. So there might be a few buildings that we can use because there were other things we were looking for too, which was long hallways. Like that was a big
Or
thing.
like
Like
the
we
hospital stuff.
Yeah, and we were like writing the script. It was like we need long highway hallways. We need
Yeah.
something, especially where like movie magic. If you have a really long hallway, then what you can do is you can go to the end of that hallway and turn around, and it looks like a completely different hallway. So as
Sure.
long as you clean up the blood on the walls and do whatever, it's like we can use this one really long hallway for
For
a
yeah.
number of scenes,
Smart. Yeah.
and that's really what we were looking for, was like this very all-purpose, like set within a location that we could shoot most of what we wanted. And we found it, and we had probably at one point 80 extras at one
Oh wow.
day that were just local people who wanted to be involved, and people who we knew that wanted to come in, and then people who were actors and were looking for a gig. So we had a ton of people, and we just had some great, again, like great happy accidents where we had these, I guess I guess it's still a term, but we had these stoners, that were sort of nonplussed by what was going on. And as they were there, we had a guy that said, "Hey, I've got an old VW van at home. Why don't I just go home and drive it here?
I love
I'm like
that.
5 minutes away." And he goes, and
Yeah.
I've also got like a hookah with the smoke system that we can have smoke actually coming out of the van. And I was like, this is absolutely perfect. Please. And then within like 15 minutes, another guy was like, so we can bring stuff? And I was like, yeah, if it works. And he's like, I've got a flamethrower. I'm like, oh, please.
What in the world?
That is a happy
Random
accident.
What
Running
in
that
conversation.
the
into someone.
world?
I got a flamethrower.
Like, did you
Hard to
did you
say no.
think when you got into filmmaking somebody would just be coming up to you saying they have a flamethrower that they
No, it's
could
like
bring
not a
to your
conversation that
set?
you think you're gonna have, and then for
Oh my
him to,
gosh.
and like bless his soul, for him to get on there and not really know how to use it all that well. So like we set a big portion of the yard on fire, and we sort of had to go to the landowners and be like, we are very sorry, but the flamethrower set some of your yard on fire. But we will rake up the dead grass and do whatever we have to make it good.
And they
And
were
they
fine, or
were like, well, it's not that bad. And they're like, yeah, I just want to put some grass over it. And I'm like, great, because like we don't want to be. It was a small town. Like it's a
yeah.
really small town, a small community there. So we don't want to be the people who's like, I remember when they made a movie there, set
Oh.
the whole damn town on fire. Like like we don't want to people that brings hell to Frogtown. We don't like want to
Sure.
be those people. But
Yeah.
it was great. I mean, everybody was having a good time. When you've got a bullhorn and you're yelling, "Okay, 3 people are on fire. You're run, 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 run. You're on fire. You're on fire." And people are running back and forth. And then it's like, you've got a machine gun. It's like, does anybody not have a weapon? Because we had like a whole armory set up where people could come and they could take a look at, and it was all plastic. Like everything that we did was plastic. So
Sure.
it was all of these, prop guns, and people would come to the armory and be like, "Hey, you're gonna be with a knife. You're gonna be with a machine gun. You're gonna have a handgun. You're gonna have." We had one person that had like a spear, so it's like you're gonna have a spear. You're gonna have this, and it's just infectious. Like when you're having fun like that, like
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Do you think I can get a gun?" And I'm like, "Let's go get guns. Let's go get guns." And I sort of felt like we were probably in a real cult at the moment, because it was like guns, guns, guns. Let's go get your guns.
Yeah.
Grab your robe, grab your gun. It's free with membership. That's what you get. So, yeah, it was. If it looks like it would have been fun, it was.
It-
That's probably a small fraction of just how much fun we were actually having.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, they all that's those scenes leading up to the very, very end where there's just people everywhere. That was probably one of my favorite parts of it because it was just like it's like slow increase of chaos because you do get a break with certain stories where it's a little more focused. It's not so it doesn't feel as big yet.
Yeah.
And then you get to this where you're outside and they're running around and people are doing crazy stuff and this person's doing something, then this person over here, and then that person's eating this person's chest, and it's like it's bananas. Because then it pans to, of course, like the big finale of like this like giant ending scene. And I was like, I don't remember if I was texting you, Mike. I probably was. I live message you usually when I'm watching this stuff. But I was like, the ending is crazy. I was like, what the hell? I was not expecting the ending to go in that direction. And so it was. And I have to say, effects wise, moving even away from what I assume is mostly practical with like the body stuff, the
Yeah.
stuff that's edited or added or the stuff that's the special effects is like really well done. Like I felt like
Thank
I
you.
didn't necessarily feel, at least in those specific moments, I wasn't like, oh, this is like a really low budget film. I thought it just felt like I just was very pleasantly surprised by that because I thought that that stuff looked really, really good. And smart, I think too, right? Because you use things to your advantage where it's not like it's constant effects the whole time you're watching,
Yeah.
and it felt like you kind of saved it for like this big moment at the end, which I thought was just really great.
And kind of going back to just how, again, how cohesive,
Yeah.
and there were so many different tones in this movie. Like there was comedic relief, there was some very like heavy moments and stuff, but it
Yeah.
made for such a great watch. And something that I've been
Hmm.
doing with Found TV are these watch parties, and Final Days was part of our April Watch Found Fridays watch party. Dylan came in, answered a few questions. You hopped in too, but it was just such a fun time. And this movie was a great movie to watch with other people and get their reactions. We were having such a great time, and it just really goes to show like how great the movie was. While we're all laughing and we're discussing it with each other, but we're not distracted enough that we're not paying attention to the movie.
Yeah.
It's just like we were wanting to be sharing all of this emotion that we're all going through
Mhm.
together. And it was one of my favorite watch parties.
Well, thank you. Thanks. And I'm glad that everyone, was able to have that experience too, because that's sort of, as being a horror fan, that definitely is part of the movie going experience that you appreciate the most. Again, as this communal sort of ritual of people getting together and
Oh
and
yeah.
sharing a gasp or sharing a laugh or whatever's happening in
Yeah.
that moment. And that was kind of the idea of the movie. Really is that have a good time with it. You
Yeah.
know, see it with some people. Even if it's not your cup of tea, but hell, if you want to make
Yeah.
fun of it and have a laugh at it that way,
And
like,
just enjoy.
Yeah.
yeah,
Either way.
enjoy it for what it was supposed to be, which was entertainment.
Yeah.
Above and beyond everything else. It's like, yeah, if you don't like this part, wait 5 minutes. If you don't like this, wait 5 minutes, and there might be something that you can attach yourself to, or you're a lover of anthologies, and that's your thing, and the whole movie might go for you in that sense. But yeah, the idea is having
Yeah.
fun. That really,
Yeah.
especially with this, and because we're talking about found footage and sometimes sort of looking at found footage, and I love found footage, and there are things
Mhm.
that I wish I could see more of, things that I wish were done more.
Me
I
too.
would, yeah. And there are elements of certain movies that I watch, and I'm like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if that was the focus for 90 minutes?
I feel
Yeah.
like that's so I think I probably say that to Mike all the time. I'm like, "Can you imagine if they just did this one thing and this was like the whole thing?" Yeah. Yeah.
And occasionally you'll see people that do, and especially, of course, it's budgetary too. People
Yeah.
who
Oh,
have the budget, a studio film have the budget. Films like Chronicle, where you have
sure.
something where obviously that's not really your run of the mill found footage movie.
Right.
It's something a little bit different. In
Yeah.
my opinion, that's probably the closest we're going to get to a live action Akira. Is the last like 15 to 20 minutes of that movie.
Of that movie.
Um,
Yeah.
and when I watched the movie, I'm like, somebody watched Akira.
when they did the
Um,
ending.
yeah, I'm like, somebody watched it here. I just waiting for somebody to scream Tetsuo, but it was like when you watch that, you're like, oh wow, that was something that was sort of unexpected. The movie as a whole, whether you dug it or whether you didn't, it was definitely a path a little less traveled. And
Mhm.
when I watch like As Above, So Below, for example,
I love that one.
and I'm sitting there watching, and I had multiple viewings of that film, and there's a point where I watched that, and I'm like, we need an Indiana Jones found footage movie. We need something that focuses a lot on the archaeology and the action and the adventure.
God,
And it doesn't even have to be horror. Like, I think found footage has been largely, grouped or classified as a subgenre of horror. And as much as I love horror as much as I do, man, I would
hmm
love to see what found footage could do in these other
and
genres that
other
it's
subgenres.
not explored that much. I mean, I would love to see, an action adventure, archaeological supernatural movie in the vein of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but done found footage. I think that would be awesome.
It's a little too big production, but it is found footage. Have you guys seen The Pyramid?
I did. Yes.
I was like,
I don't think
that
so.
gets me close to what you were saying.
But
It's not fully there.
that's not horror, right?
It is.
Is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Is it hybrid?
I think it goes hybrid, but
Yeah,
it's very found footage
I'm pretty sure I
for
cut it
most of it.
off. Yeah. I tried to
I
watch
have
this one.
fun
I
with
cut it
that
off.
one. I actually think
Maybe I should revisit.
for it being very big production, because that's the thing too, is
I
like
thought I
with found footage, it lends itself to not be a big production.
Yeah.
yeah.
So sometimes when you do overproduce it, you lose the charm of found footage. But I thought it was a good one, and it just reminded me because you were talking about like the archaeology stuff, and I
Kind
was
of
like,
side of
that's
it.
kind of close to what we
Yeah.
were discussing.
Yeah.
And I love stuff like that. And I
Mhm.
love, again, of taking something that is primarily sort of, very compartmentalized, and some found
Mhm.
footage has become very compartmentalized where we've got a box and we're all just trying to keep putting stuff in the same box. That being able to really step out of it and do something that has hints of all these other genres, and being able to focus on some storytelling techniques that you don't see that often. That's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that really interests me. I like believe me, I like the stuff that's also focuses on the old tropes and is done really well. But I
Yeah.
really like going, oh wow, that's surprising, or I didn't think that I
Yeah.
was going to see that. And I think that is something that has always interested me in the idea of writing and then creating found footage. Is, we're really all just waiting to see the guy, in the corner looking away from the
Faced away
camera,
from you. Yeah.
and then we don't see what happens. That
Yeah.
often is sort of what we do, or everything gets so chaotic that the camera's moving this way and that, and it's very difficult to pinpoint it. I kind of
Yeah.
think that's why I wanted to do what I did with the last bit of Final Days. Was how much can we show people? Like, realistically, if
Yeah.
people aren't expecting to see all this stuff,
Definitely
let's
not.
just keep throwing it at them until the
Yeah.
very last second of the film. And then at the very least they can go, well, they didn't pull back.
Yeah.
They showed us as much as they possibly could. And that
Yeah.
was sort of, part of the intent there. And also with Holes in the Sky. Like, I wanted to show stuff happen in the last 30 seconds of that movie that for
Yeah.
its budget, I don't think people were expecting. Hopefully they weren't
I
expecting.
no, for sure. Well, and kind of to piggyback off your point, I think we're starting to finally get to a point, and more specifically in horror, because I feel like I don't ever watch anything else. But in typically in found footage, it used to be this very specific formula of the way that
Mhm.
they handled found footage movies, and you saw it for so long, even whether it was an indie project or a bigger budget, it didn't matter. It was very, we start out really slow, we get a lot of what's that E word when you get a bunch of stuff?
Exposition.
Oh yeah.
Exposition. Thank you. And it's like you get a lot of nothing, right? And then the very end is it's just bananas. And we Mike and I have talked about this in great lengths numerous times about the fact that that's cool and it works. It does work. There's proof that it works. Even outside of like Blair Witch, there's proof that it works. But now we're starting to see these films in the found footage world in horror where they're kind of pushing that to the side. And like
Yeah.
this is a perfect example of that. This starts like wild. In my opinion, this is I would not consider this to be in that blocks for that type of formula. It's very outside of it. And to your point, like a lot of them, we have tons and tons of ghost found footage because it's like, everybody's filming stuff in their house and making, scary things happen. And so you're getting one story, one piece of something, and that's the whole film. That's the whole hour 20, however long it is.
Yeah.
Whereas stuff like this is coming out now to show how big found footage can be, even though it starts out really small or it can sometimes have small moments. And I think that's a testament to where the genre, what I hope the subgenre is going, because I love stuff like this. Like we had a blast with this. Godforsaken was the same way. It was just bananas the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
and we're just seeing, and again, this is one of the reasons I love found footage so much, is because it's giving these like indie filmmakers with all these new ideas, these new connections, and these new just everything just trying to get somewhere different. And it's really cool to see because there are so many of them that are copy and paste versions of everything else. And it just gets to a point where you're like, I mean, sure, being in a tent in the woods and hearing scary stuff, sure, it's old school. We love it, right? But it's time to kind of show, I think, to your, like what you're saying earlier about just where the subgenre can go. And I think this is a great example of that. I mean, it's just balls to the wall from the beginning to the end. And then you think like it can't get any crazier and more chaotic. And then you go outside and there's people running around doing all kinds of stuff. And I love that it took some similar little tropes. We've got certain stories, Dylan's, I think in particular, where it feels familiar, and
Yeah.
then boom into something else, boom into
Yes.
something else. And I think that jumping, as cohesive as the story is, it's like a to us as the viewer, because we weren't maybe expecting it to go in all these crazy ass directions that it went.
You know,
Absolutely agree. And
That was
yeah,
my long-winded thought. Sorry.
I had no idea, again, how crazy the flow of the whole movie was going to go, because like you said,
Yeah.
some parts were just so funny, some parts were darker, and like I
Yeah.
said, heavier, but then you had like Grandma, which was that jump scare and creepy
That's the
factor.
more like, yeah.
um but kind of going into that, because we were talking about like the innovation and how big a movie can be, and because of it's an anthology, we do get to see more directors, different stories. Is this something you could see, and if you could tell us, is this something you could see getting a sequel or doing another anthology with a different theme?
I think that there's room for that, definitely. And
Yay.
and that's the overarching idea, is going into it. How many stories are taking place on a day that would be as chaotic as this day? So we were really only focusing on a handful, focusing on
Right.
5. And those 5 we felt, profoundly captured what we were looking for. But those are just 5 stories. If 5 out of 5, 100 million that would be happening during an event like that, more than that. So yeah, I think that there's room for it. I like the idea of, I kind of like the idea of an anthology happening after all of this.
Oh.
That
Yeah.
kind of interests me. I was always more interested in like what happens if like, Bruce Willis really fucks up and the world isn't
Yeah.
saved. Like those are the stories that appeal to
What
me.
next?
Yeah, a little more is like, they couldn't break the asteroid up, or oh, well, you know what, they couldn't contain the evil back in that old relic of a bastardized book that we found. I
Yeah.
love this idea of what happens when it's not a happy ending, and then you
Yeah.
even go beyond the ending. Like what
Mhm.
happens past the bad ending? Does everything just cease to exist, or now do we have such utter like pandemonium and chaos that it would be probably way too expensive? But we did a lot for what we had
Yeah.
with our budget, like I can say. I mean, we've got a ton of behind the scenes footage of us in green unitards with a rod puppet getting something that happens in the inn to move.
Oh my god.
That's awesome.
That
That was
is
all.
awesome.
That was all physical. Like that was against a green screen with people with rods, and we've got fishing line making the mouth move up and down, and we've got
He
silicone the
wasn't
tentacles to get it to move.
he wasn't CGI or like
No,
edited in.
that was a puppet.
I am blown away by that. I had no idea. Because
Yeah.
I know practical effects, as much as we love them, they can be hard to accomplish sometimes.
No, this
And
was a nightmare. It was a total
I
nightmare.
was going to say, and contrary to popular belief, they're not always cheaper. It is not always cheaper to do practical effects. And so I think I just assumed, because I was like, that's why I made that comment. I was like, well, he looks really good. Like, I couldn't believe, well, that makes perfect sense then. Because I didn't, oh my God, I didn't realize that. That's crazy.
Yeah, every piece of it could move. So we
Okay.
had like we had almost 10 people. And the
I
thing's only
imagine
like this, it's like this
it's a
big,
lot.
So we've got like 10 people in these unitards. In my entire living room, we just draped in green screen. So we had green
Oh
screen
my
everywhere. And then all my friends like we can't see it. And I'm like, just move it, just move the arm and move it this way. And of course, they've got the green mask on,
Oh
and
my God.
at some point, like, and this is what's crazy about filmmaking. So I'm going to totally throw my buddy Steve under the bus. Like, Steve was one of the writers on the story. So we're all
Yeah.
in my living room, and we've got unitards on, and we've got a few different cameras, because we've got everything that's shot from the perspective of Tim, the camera guy, is done on a traditional cinema camera. And then we also have phones, and we have, like GoPros and stuff set up, so that every time we cut to something in the movie, that camera is supposed to have its own identity. Like whether it's an iPhone or a Galaxy or a GoPro or a security camera. Like, we tried to give cameras personality. So it was like, oh, we know we're going to cut to this one. So this one's going to be portrait mode. We're going to cut to this one, but this is going to look like a security camera. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. So we've got all these cameras set up, and we're all trying to puppet this ridiculous thing. And it's got like under its tongue, it's got like a little weight, like a little, like you put like in a nut, it's got a little flat, and that is tied to this fishing line that comes under the chin out through the neck, so that we can, pull the fishing line in the mouth open and all that stuff. And we're like, oh shit, like it needs to have like, some viscous sort of something, slobber or something. And my buddy Steve is standing there, and he's like, oh, you should just put some lube on it, and just takes a bottle of lube out of his pocket. And we're like, that's industrious. And I'm really glad that happened. But maybe we don't talk about why you're carrying lube around. Unless he is just so resourceful that he woke up that morning going, I think we're going to be puppeting an enormous eldritch elder god. I should bring my lube. So, yeah. So the slobber is motion lotion. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Because
Of
yeah,
all the things.
it does become that says that and the flamethrower.
I
That and
know.
the
What
flamethrower
a
for these
crazy experience.
conversations. Like,
you don't realize how hot those things are, because we all had to get so far away. Like, you can't, I for insurance purposes and everything, I was like, listen, let's let the poor bastard working it just work it. No one get close to him. If he explodes, he did agree to do this. We have a signature, but like, everyone needs to back away. So we're all back. We've got the, the zoom lens and everything, trying to get as tight in as possible. And we're 60 feet back, and it's just sweltering. Like, we're just dripping with sweat.
That's crazy.
And this was on a day that it snowed. We were shooting in April, and this is just to tell you, if things can go wrong, they will. Because we're like, oh, it's not too bad today. And over a period of like 4 hours, it must have dropped like 35 degrees and started snowing. And this was like towards the end of April, and we're like, you're kidding me. Like, we specifically wanted to shoot this at a time when we weren't going to have those weather elements.
yeah.
So we chose spring. But then we were like, oh, wait a second. Like, will there be like ash and stuff in the air? Like, maybe we could just spin this, and if we see snow, it's not snow. Something somewhere is on fire, and it's just part of the whole ash and ember thing. But yeah, those are
Yeah,
the things that happen when you're like least expecting it. Like, it'll just start snowing
that's
in like late
insane.
April.
This has been an enlightening conversation.
It really
I
has.
only pull out the loop stories for people I really like.
Aw,
Thank you so
thanks.
much.
Those are my blue chip stories, my loop stories.
I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
you're very welcome.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know, Mike, you wanted to ask about future projects. I know we need to wrap up.
Yeah, so basically, I did bring up the about like if there's gonna be anything like a sequel or another
Yeah.
anthology series, but for you, just in general, whether it be tied to this project or not, is there anything that you're able to tell us of anything oncoming that you have going on?
I did produce in a limited capacity another anthology. I didn't direct anything, and it's a traditional cinematic anthology, a horror anthology, from an actress, Jen Nangle, based off the West Coast, and I helped on some post production stuff on that. So that'll be out under the Horrorfix banner, hopefully later
Okay.
this year. Right now,
Oh, cool.
it's really close. I'm just doing some quality control stuff with it with her.
Yeah.
I do have a fictional podcast that we just got done recording. So
Ooh.
I'm
Where you tell like a story?
yeah,
Oh, I love those. Those are
yeah.
so fun.
If you want, I'll send you the first episode before anybody else gets to listen.
Ooh, we got the loop story and
Yes. So it's called Dislocated, and it's about it's set in 1984, and
okay.
it's a group of individuals that are all trapped in a gas station while a world event happens around them, and then they are dislocated to another place entirely. And it's about them trying to figure out what's going on, why they're there, where the rest of the world is, and where they're at now.
That
So
I
sounds
want to do one
awesome.
of those so bad. They are so cool. I was listening to one about like dark face stuff recently, and I love stuff like that.
oh
It's
yeah,
crazy what people can do with just like just sound. Like there's no visuals. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's
ooh, I'm
pretty
so excited.
it's pretty insane. It's got a pretty big cast. We were lucky to get a lot of people involved, but it was my answer to shows like what they call mystery box shows that I really like Lost
Mm.
and From,
Oh
and be
yeah. Oh, I
able to
love
have
From.
a
Yeah,
very
I
mysterious
love it.
element that where you're constantly guessing like, is this science fiction, is this horror,
Ooh, I'm
is
so
this
excited.
fantasy? So it's got a lot of cross genre appeal, and the first two
Yeah.
episodes are totally in the can. I'm just finishing up some of the audio engineering on it, and then we've got a whole season that's plotted out that we're writing, and then hopefully we're going to do a couple seasons of it because we've got a story that sets itself
Oh,
over the course of multiple episodes. So we've got that, and then we've got another fictional podcast that's been written called Brick Window, which is a someone deciding that their entire life in their world and who they thought they were is completely different, and a mystery that spans across their entire family and them trying to uncover it. And it's also got a very strong like science fiction supernatural horror
very
element to
cool.
it. And then we've started, like, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like maybe I'm doing too much. So then we're
We're here
it's like,
for it.
yeah, it's like, how old is my kid? Last time I checked. So we're we're actually in pre-production on a documentary. Um, and it's been something that I've been wanting to do for a while. But it's called Examining Evil. So what we're doing is we're traveling and we're interviewing people who believe that they have it in one aspect or another encountered true evil. So that could be in the eyes of a serial killer. That could be through an exorcism. It's going through everything, but the focus is the idea of encountering true evil and people's real life experiences encountering evil.
And that's something you're in the process of doing or you have already started doing? Like,
We're in pre-production out right now, so we're getting
okay. Oh, I'm excited
all
for
of our
that too. That sounds awesome.
we're getting all of our dates set up right now for our interviews, and we've got
Okay.
some really good people lined up. And then there's another documentary that unfortunately legally I can't talk about
That's
on the
okay.
air, but I could definitely talk about it off the air if you want.
Okay. Cool.
Well, listen, anything with your name attached to it, just let us know because we're huge fans of yours.
Yeah.
Anything that you're tied to, we're gonna
No, for
listen,
sure.
watch.
Yeah, for sure.
Just let us
Help
know.
promote. Yeah, for sure.
And I
Yeah,
love
and
that. And I can't thank you enough. I mean,
of
it
course.
truly is wonderful that not only are people taking the time out to watch things that I've created, but that you're enjoying it. It means a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and Mike and I, we love found footage, but even probably more than that, we love our found footage filmmakers. Very, very important, and special people to us. We think you guys are superheroes, and we love it. So it's always really cool to talk to
100%.
you guys. So
And
yeah.
it shows. It shows your dedication and
Oh, good.
enthusiasm shows.
Thank you.
Good. Good. I'm glad that you feel that way because I don't want to ever have a reputation for like, that bitch on found footage. I don't ever want to be known as that. I want to be known like that. So, well, great. Well, thank you again so much for chatting with us. We did
Thank you.
really enjoy this, and this was a really crazy wild
Yeah.
conversation. This is going to be a blast to cut clips of for promo. Let me just put it to you like that.
Yeah.
But so of
Just
course,
a loop of me saying lube over and over again.
like I'll do a counter, like how many times it got said in the just
That would be amazing. Yeah.
um
The lube meter. Like how much
there you
friction
go.
are we at? Minimal friction to no friction at all on the lube meter. Yeah.
And of course, all the places where you can find Ash will be in the description for this episode as well with Mike's links and stuff. And just a reminder, if you're not already on Found TV, I don't know what's happening or why you're even here, honestly. You got to be more committed to found footage. Go check out Found TV. You can download the app, watch it for free with ads, or if you use keyword voices, you get 10% off an annual subscription. It's way, way fair price. It goes to a really great cause. It goes to filmmakers like Ash, and they're able to just do a lot of things. We love Monica and Louie. We're huge fans. So you just put in VOICES and you get 10% off annual subscription. So,
And I believe not only Final Days, but Holes in the Sky can be found on Found TV as well, correct?
I'm not for sure about that one. I would have to check with our distro on that one, but it might.
I don't remember if Holes is or not. Well, it's been 2 years since I
But you
watched
can see Final Days, that's for
it.
sure.
100%.
Yes, most
You can
certainly.
see Final Days. All right. Well, thank you everybody for hanging out with us on this episode of Found Footage Fridays. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy your week, and Mike and I will see you next week.